Hey, this Realm of the Mist podcast is brought to you proudly by the Nurses Guild.
Hi, this is Eddie Deason. You're listening to Breaking the Fourth Wall. I was Mandark in Dexter's laboratory. Ha 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 ha.
Get us started. Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome to Breaking the Fourth Wall. I am Christopher Stolle, and again, I get to sit here with some would consider a legend. I'm actually flabbergasted because I've grown up watching this gentleman basically be bottom square, if I'm not mistaken, on the Hollywood Square.
Yeah.
But as I've combed his IMDb, I've discovered that this man's had a hand in a lot of things that I've watched or seen in so many years growing up. Ladies and gentlemen, the one, the only, the incomparable, Bruce Vilanch. Bruce, how you doing today?
Well, I was never a bottom. Thank you very much. I was.
Am I thinking wrong? I thought you were bottom square.
I was always to the left of Whoopi, if that's possible.
Okay.
I mean, I was to her right. It was camera left, we call it in the biz.
Okay.
But if you were looking at the screen, I was to her left. So I was always up there. No, they never put me. They kept me next to her because they thought I could tame her. But of course, it's undoable.
Yeah, I was about to say, I've seen The View. You failed.
And thank you. I've had my hand in a lot of stuff, so there you go.
Well, that's
I
it.
suppose if you put your hand in enough things, you become legendary.
Well,
But
I mean,
it's not helping Ron Jeremy. He's going to go up for 330 years. So.
I mean, like as an example, I knew you were part of the Star Wars holiday special. I'm a Star Wars fanatic, so
Yeah.
I knew about that. But I mean, Donnie and Marie, John Ritter being a sound mind and body, all the different Emmys and Oscar you have writing credits to. The Cheat Show. I'm literally just kind of.
God, you're digging deep. You're down in that the things on the IMDb stuff that my agent says you could delete those. It makes you seem much older than you are. But I own it all. I mean, I don't literally own it. I don't cash checks anymore, but I own it emotionally, and I'm aware I was a part of all these things, and I'm happy to talk about them. But really, I mean, those are really great golden oldie credits.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, I smiled when I saw that you were part of the 25th birthday party of Sesame Street, and I thought my mother-in-law would absolutely love you for being involved with the Elvis Presley documentary, But I mean, this is only just your writing credentials. You've also, which I found funny, and we definitely got to talk about this, as well as a lot of your appearances on where you're in front of the camera. You play you.
Well, yeah, I mean, or a variation thereof. I mean, I've been cast as a cameo as myself because I'm an iconic individual. So it's an easy joke, which I don't mind at all. But I mean, I've done a bunch of acting. I did Hairspray on Broadway for a year and toured it for a year before that, and some other things. But mostly, I've been mostly writing. I mean, I never stopped the acting, but it was always in smallish kind of things. One of my favorite gigs, it's another drag thing, but was on the Cheech Show. Cheech had a show. It was a sitcom.
Right.
And we only aired 3 of them because the Writers Guild went on strike.
Oh.
And the network canceled the show because we didn't have anything in the pipeline to give them when we came back on the air. So, but in those 3 episodes, I played. Cheech was a guy. He was a guy named Cheech who ran a chop shop in East LA, and somehow through these crazy machinations that we wrote, he was always involved with some guest star who was very big. We had Willie Nelson, and we had Jackie Harry, who was Jack A at the time, and there was another one that we didn't even get to shoot. But I was somebody who came to him with a car that was in trouble, and I was a gossip columnist named Luella Fella. I
Okay.
was, we think I was a transgender. We weren't sure. We hadn't gotten that deep in the characterization, but I love doing it because I had a beard. So I was a transgender with a hormone problem,
Okay.
and I would have to go shop at the Forgotten Woman, which was before there were plus sizes. There were like little tiny boutiques where big ladies went, and drag queens. And so I would have to go shop there. Anyway, Llewellyn Feller was a very funny character, and had the show gone beyond the 3 episodes, who knows? You know, I might have had Big Bang money. Who knows?
No, it's true.
But
Now,
that's one of the things. As a member of the Writers Guild, I can't criticize it too harshly, but it did lose me millions.
well, the big thing I obviously got to do is like we got to take this back to where it all began. What made you want to get into the entertainment industry, and why did it lead you more towards writing than really being in front of the screen?
A very apropos question. I was always I was a child actor. I was fascinated. I mean, I made faces and I danced around, and my parents were very enabling. They said they saw I was happy doing that, so they encouraged it, and they would take me to auditions. And I was a child actor. I was never a child star, or we'd be having this conversation in rehab. You know, but I did commercials. I grew up in Jersey, and so I would go into New York and I would do commercials, and I did a couple of stage things. And but what happened was, as I got older, I developed a very deep voice, and I was a big kid, and I just looked older. I was like born 40, and
Okay.
so I found myself auditioning opposite people, guys who were really the real thing. And you know, I was not going to get cast in kids' parts, and I wasn't going to get cast in adult parts. So I started writing about that. I think it was kind of a form of therapy. And my parents had just showed it to people, and they said, "Gee, he can write." So they began encouraging that. And their plan was for me. Well, they had several plans. They wanted me to be a lawyer because they thought I could perform in court. You know, they took me to see lawyer movies, and we were like Orson Welles would do orations. And I said, "Yeah, I'd like to do that, but not in court." And my father was a doctor, and he thought, you know, I'd maybe become a doctor, but the family joke was I had no patience.
Yeah.
So eventually they said, well, write for newspapers because newspapers will never die. Oh, no.
Foresight.
Yeah. So I started writing, and I wrote for the school paper, and then I went to Ohio State, where I was the theater major and a journalism major. And then, are you vaping? Oh, I hope you are.
Yes. Yes.
Oh, good. Or else you're smoking a doob quietly, which would not be bad either. I went to Ohio State, and I majored in both of them in theater and journalism, and got a dual degree.
Okay.
And wound up at the Chicago Tribune. And I met Bette Midler and started writing for her. And so I got to combine all of the things I liked. I got to continue performing and continue writing and continue being in show business while pretending I was a journalist for 5 years.
Well, that's interesting because when you mentioned the journalism, even all the way back into the high school days where you were writing for the school paper, what were the type of things that you were writing? Were they editorial or opinion pieces,
Well,
or
actually,
were
I
they
did.
literally like, you know,
I
cheerleaders?
was actually in all my newspaper jobs, I was a reporter. And I was, and sometimes I was a feature writer, mostly concentrating on show business, or I was an editor. I mean, I had to do all of those things at one point or another. But what it finally shook out as was a feature writer for the Trib, covering show business and being kind of like a wipe-up critic. Gene Siskel was the movie critic, and I was the number 2. So I would go to see movies he didn't want to see, like The World's Greatest Athlete, with Jan Michael Vincent in a loincloth, which I very much wanted to see. Ding. So that's how it went. That was the kind of stuff I did. I guess I'd say showbiz journalist is one way of putting it, but it was, you know, my bent. It fed into what I was interested in, what I knew about.
Well, then it leads into your writing and all that, and of course when did the writing go into the more comedy stages? Because I mean, some of the things that I see here that are absolutely mind blowing is that you are credited as a writer for like the Comedy Relief 5, which
I did all the comic reliefs.
all the comic reliefs.
There were about 12 of them, I think, but
which, primarily are Billy Crystal, Whoopi Goldberg, and of course the late great Robin Williams. You're talking about the kings of comedy of the day, and you're writing for them.
Well, we all came up together. I met Billy in Chicago. I interviewed him for the Trib. He was doing stand-up at the Playboy Club. I was sent to interview him, and then a couple of weeks later, I was out on the road with Barry Manilow, who was Beth's original piano player. And when he broke off from her, he went on his own. I went out and we put his act together. And he played a club in Philly, the Bijou, which was the big club where all the, everybody rock and roll and stuff broke in. And Billy was the opening act with two other guys he had, an act called Three's Company. There were three kids from Long Island who had a comedy act. And I remember watching it. There was the dressing room was upstairs, and there was a balcony, and you could lean over the balcony like Miss Kitty in Gunsmoke and look down at the saloon below, and we would watch the show. And the Three's Company would come on, and we watch him. And Barry and I would look and say, "That guy's going to be a star." I mean, Billy was obviously like on the way.
Right.
And then that was actually before I interviewed him. The Playboy thing happened afterwards, because at that point he broke off on his own. And so I started writing with him then. And I didn't write a lot for him until he started hosting award shows. He hosted the Grammys, he hosted the Oscars, and I contributed on those.
Okay.
But we all it started with Bet. For 5 years I was in Chicago writing for her, and going on the road with her on the weekends. And then I would meet other people who would come in and say, "Oh, you can write for Bette Midler. I've heard about you. Would you write for me?" So she was a great calling card, and I'm still doing it 50 years later.
Was that the target when you started writing, that you wanted to get into more comedy type?
It was what I liked. It was. I never had a plan. I mean, the plan had been shattered years ago. The plan was to be an actor, to go to New York and be an actor, and that didn't happen. So I figured I would get in it. Well, I looked at Woody Allen and Mel Brooks, and I thought, well, they're funny, and they've become movie stars, and they write their own stuff. And I said, maybe that's what I will do. But the movie star part didn't happen, because I never really pursued. I didn't want to be a stand-up, and I didn't know quite how to do it. Otherwise, I mean, if I paid closer attention, I would have done, I don't know, maybe what Lily Tomlin, who I also write for, did, which was approach it as an actress. And when she got on a television show, she was lucky enough to get on Laugh-In, and she got to do a lot of different characters. Right. And that became her act. When we put it together, that was her stage show, and that led to acting in movies and theater and whatnot. So anyway, I didn't do that, but what I did worked out. So, and then after 20 years of doing that, suddenly I was on television every night on Hollywood Squares, and that makes you a famous person, and you get offered other kinds of things like Hairspray, and
Well, we do got to talk about that. You were credited.
That's the shorthand version of what happened.
On IMDb, you're credited with 415 episodes of Hollywood Squares.
Well, probably that's true. Yeah.
That is, I got to imagine that's some sort of record for anybody to appear on like a game show outside of like a host.
Well, when you consider that you do 5 of them a day, you come in and do a week in a day. And so, yes, but I'm sure there are people who were on longer. I mean, the original edition of Hollywood Squares was on NBC for 14 years.
Right.
Even Paul Lynde was not there at the beginning. He came in somewhere in the middle of it and stayed to the end, by which time he was the star of the show. But then it was another iteration of it 5 years later with Joan Rivers. So, there are a lot of people. I mean, Tom Kennedy, who just died at 93, was a host of about 415 different game shows. So he's got a lot of credits. They're shoving those credits over him.
Well, I definitely gotta ask with Hollywood Squares, and I remember, like, you had normal actors and you had people who were on normally, and then you would have Alf or the Muppets.
Oh, well, yes. Sure.
So with all those in mind, what were some of your favorite celebrity squares that worked alongside you on the Hollywood Squares?
Well, Alf and the Muppets were mainly because they were characters and they wanted jokes and they wanted stuff to play, and they also were not prone to moods. Even Piggy was charming the whole time, because basically that was Frank Oz who was doing Piggy, and he's brilliant, and he just wanted jokes, and then he knew how to play them. So they were actually they were great fun. The regulars on the show were terrific. Brad Garrett, Gilbert Gottfried, who's out of his mind, Caroline Ray, who's hysterical. Those were great fun. And then we had these weird guests. I mean, the thing about Squares was it wasn't like a high stakes game show.
Right.
You know, it was fun. And nobody knew what the real answers were, because half of the time there were no real answers. I mean, a question would start with, according to Dr. Joyce Brothers, well, you knew there was no real answer, because Joyce was an advice columnist and you didn't know what she said. You had to make up that shit. Or, or they would say something that she may or may not have written, and you would have to agree or disagree. And so obviously it was not Jeopardy.
Right.
So we could have fun. That's how we could have people like Little Richard. You know, Little Richard arrived, and I was the head writer, and so I would go in and I would brief everybody on what they were doing, because we would do 5 shows in a day. So in the morning on Saturday and Sunday, I would go in and explain, and each one had a packet of questions that they were going to be asked, so they could play around with jokes or whatever, so they wouldn't be caught unawares. We didn't give them the real answer even when there were real answers, because the contestants had to know that the stars didn't know the answers. Otherwise, they would just agree with everything. I agree with him,
Right.
you know, and there'd be no game. So, but they also knew that a lot of the answers were like out of Cloud Cuckoo Land. So I went into Little Richard with the cards, and I sat down, and he looked at me and he said, "I don't know nothing. You're going to tell me everything. I don't know nothing." And he wasn't kidding. I mean, you know, he was Little Richard. That was what he knew. He knew how to be Little Richard. He knew how to be a brilliant songwriter, piano player, singer, performer. And he obviously had created Little Richard.
Right.
But he didn't have a whole lot of book learning. So, I mean, any of these things, and he didn't have a whole lot of opinions on stuff either. You know, he was just going through life being Little Richard. So that was one of my favorites, because I said, you know, just every question you ask, just answer like that. I don't know nothing. And then whatever you say is okay, you know, because you were ready to, you warned them. You have no idea what you're talking about. Go ahead and then do it. And he did that, and it was hysterical. It became a running gag in the show. And eventually, of course, we had a couple of questions, but he had to know the answers, you know, so he would say, "Oh, I know that. I do know that," which was okay. I mean, it could have been a bluff, you know. I mean, people used to come on and bluff, and as a result, the contestants would stop going to them unless they had to. You know, it was tic-tac-toe.
Right.
So if you didn't have to go to that square, you would avoid it because you knew she was going to fuck with you. So you weren't going to. But Patti LaBelle was very big on that. She liked to fuck with you. Yeah. And I said, don't do that, because they won't call on you because they don't want to be fucked with. So you have to balance that. You can do it once, and then the next time they come, you have to be real. And then the next time, I mean, there's, as insane as this sounds, there is a strategy to this. I mean, you know, it's not like winning the war in Libya, but I mean, there is a strategy to it. And that was part of my job, was to take these people when they came in at 9 o'clock Saturday morning and say, it's a very funny game, but there's an art to it.
Well, see, that some of the questions I was going to ask was how predetermined were the questions or the responses to the questions, you know, and it really blows my mind that you guys all had, like, for lack of a better term here, the script of all the questions that were going to be asked, so you could come up with a way of coming up with a true.
Yeah, well, we gave them a list with the questions they get if they were called by a contestant, and a bluff answer, which was, you know, sounded like the real thing but wasn't, and a joke if we felt they could carry a joke, if they were the kind of person who could carry a joke. And so they knew, so they had time to, like, figure out, in between each game, they would look to see what the questions were. because at the beginning we tried it without that, but it was like there were too many stage waits, while people decided what they could, how they wanted to look. They wanted to look like they knew what they were doing.
Right.
So,
Well,
and
how
it was
many
an
times?
entertainment show. As I say, it wasn't like, there wasn't $100,000 riding on this thing.
Well, how many times? How often did somebody go, for lack of a better term here, off script? As an example, like if you were asked a question that you knew damn right well what the answer was, but you were looking at the contestants like, I kind of want to mess with them, and you just come up with something off the cuff.
It happened. I mean, I probably was guilty of that, or I would make it easy because I wanted that person to win, because it'd be good for the show if he won or she won, or it really depended on the moment. It was one of those spot calls, but yeah, that happened, and you can't help it. Some people you want to help, and some people have an attitude, and you go, well, maybe I could mess around with this one. But also sometimes you have to show that you're not like all knowing. I mean, it wasn't that kind of a show. It wasn't It wasn't like quiz show,
Right.
where everybody was a university professor. I mean, these are people in show business who were doing this, so you could be wrong. And I didn't know the real answers either. I never knew. I said, don't tell me the real answer.
Well, in this day and age where everything gets rebooted and revisited, I mean, right now you can go on the Game Show Network and find brand new episodes of Press Your Luck, for example, which was one of my favorite game shows growing
They're
up.
doing new stuff?
New stuff.
Ah.
What would you do if they brought back Hollywood Squares? Would you
Hollywood
take
Squares,
the seat back?
First, they'd have to get rid of the show that the original owners sold to Viacom called Hip Hop Squares, which you can find on VH1.
You served your country with honor, and now are trying to pry health care from the Veterans Administration. Did you know that Congress recently made changes to allow vets to get care outside of the VA services? The Nurses Guild of Florida is owned and operated by a Vietnam-era vet who knows how difficult it is to return to civilian life. Why not get your home health services from a 5-star Medicare home health agency, the experts at home care, the Nurses Guild? Rather than wait in lines for care, the Nurses Guild will provide care to you in the comfort of your own home. PTSD, IV therapy, wound care, or post-amputation therapy, no matter your diagnosis, we can help. A nurse will be assigned to you, visit you at home to assess your needs, and work directly with you to develop a personalized plan of care. Here at the Nurses Guild, we have nurses from every specialty, so no matter your diagnosis, we have the right caregiver for you. The nurses, therapists, and home health team of the Nurses Guild is ready to serve you. All of our essential healthcare workers are fully screened, supervised, and COVID tested. Call the Nurses Guild today to arrange your home health visit at 954-596-9806 for Broward County and 561-826-8937 for Palm Beach County. Remember, healthcare put off is healthcare too late. Stay safe during the pandemic. Wear a mask and insist those around you wear a mask. Wash your hands frequently and stay home as much as possible.
Which is Hollywood Squares with rappers, because rappers are so funny. I mean, it's Flavor Flav and everybody else.
There you go.
And I was amazed because I had tuned in, and they are using questions we wrote 20 years ago, and they're using our set. They bought the set, and they bought, yeah. So it looks like our old show, and it and a lot of the questions are from the old show, and which just kind of cracks me up. And I don't know how it stayed on, because it was on Nick Cannon was hosting it, and he quit after the first week.
Oh wow!
On MTV, and MTV moved it to MTV2, and then Viacom moved it to VH1. I don't know, in their wisdom, what the strategy was. But so until that plays out, they really can't reboot Hollywood Squares. But I think that the other thing is that all these game shows that are showing up now, not necessarily on the Game Show Network, because that's very small potatoes compared to network or syndication. but shows like Match Game and Card Sharks, and there's another one that's on. They were never successful in their reiterations. They tried to reboot them before, and they failed. I was on the rebooted Match Game, which CBS, Ricky Lake is the host, and I was on it with Betty White and Kathy Griffin, and I forget who all else, but it didn't work. And
I mean, Betty White was on it. It should have been a success right then and there.
well, Betty White was a success, but it didn't take for some reason. It was probably the time, you know. Then they brought it back without some. It's a hit, but that's partially because the Match Game people remember has been off the air a long time. Hollywood Squares has never been off the air a long time. I mean, because of the hip hop thing, I guess. But I mean, we have been off the air 20 years, so it could be ripe. But I don't know. I just have a feeling that I don't know. It could happen. It could happen.
Very cool. Well, I do know that besides all the stuff that we're reminiscing and everything, you are still active. In fact, you have something coming up tomorrow, literally November 3rd.
Tomorrow, election night. I'm going to be on Stephen Colbert's Showtime special, his election, because he's not on CBS tomorrow night because they're covering the election. So he moves over to Showtime, which is a Viacom CBS property, and he does his own show, and he's going to have one of those mammoth LED walls, his wall of experts, which looks not unlike Hollywood Squares. And so of course there I am in the middle, and I'm one of the experts he goes to. Now, obviously it's all canned, and obviously they shot a lot of stuff depending on how the night works out. If the night has got long, dreary, we're waiting for Iowa kind of pauses, he will go to this wall. If it's a nail biter from the get-go, which it probably won't be, he'll go. He won't be able to go to the wall. But I'm guessing in the early stages when there's not enough votes to make a difference, he'll go to the wall then. And I don't know how much of it will remain, but I did it. So if you may see me, you may see a snatch of me, pardon the expression, as I go by.
Well, is your intention there to be, well, for lack of a better term, a witness, or are you there for comedy relief, or is it actual expertise?
I'm an expert on something. We never really kind of made sure what. He asked me questions. It's very Hollywood Squares-like, the whole thing. And you do kind of a joke answer. And then he does. His answers are even jokier because nothing's real. It's all like, this is truly a time killer.
Right.
But it's very funny. I mean, the stuff that we did was funny.
Which is kind of funny and ironic too, because as I was setting up for this interview, I had YouTube on in the background, and I'm a huge Dungeons and Dragons fan. I love D&D. And I found where one of the people who do live streaming D&D, Matt Mercer, sat down and did a one-off campaign with one Stephen Colbert. And I was actually listening to it in the background as I was setting up for this interview today.
All right. I didn't know he was a gamer.
Yeah, apparently he played D&D back in college and did this for whatever reason he decided to do this.
I would think so. I thought maybe this was going to be like the gamers always look at me and they go, "You should do the Stewie Griffin story."
Well, were you a gamer?
A lot of Family Guy viewers among gamers, I think, but they're not gaming; they're watching Family Guy. So
it's probably true.
I'd cut my hair and play Peter. I got the stomach for it.
I guess
I also have the stomach for Stewie. So
you don't have the football helmet. You don't have the football shaped head, though.
No, but I need your hat. Doesn't he always have a hat? And...
But were you a gamer? Are you a gamer?
No. I tell you,
not even a big mean game of checkers.
Once computers came in, I was so busy using them to write on and research and stuff that I just didn't want to do anything that would distract me from that. Okay. So I never got into game culture, and I never had the game machines, the the Play Bug, whatever it's called, the
The
Xbox,
PlayStation and all. Yeah.
PlayStation. I never had any of those toys because I was, when I went to the keyboard, it was always like I'm going to work or I'm going to do correspondence or something like that. And then, of course, porn came along and and the lockdown, and so there was a marriage made in heaven. Porn, lockdown.
Strong forearms.
Well, especially for those who aren't gamers.
Well, the big question, I guess, then is what do you do with your time off? I mean, with COVID, like you said, right now, and all. And I'm assuming you're still working, you're still writing, you're still producing things when this pandemic releases. But what does Bruce Vilanch do when he's not writing? And
well, the nice thing about writing is you can do it without pants. And I've only worn pants 4 times since March 12th because I've been in a lot. So writers can keep writing. I mean, we're very lucky in that we can keep doing and getting paid for what we do. Actors are not so lucky. If nothing is shooting, and stage actors are particularly, because even though film actors and television actors can come back because they have protocols in place now so they can actually shoot stuff, there's nothing in place for stage actors or for musicians who perform live or any of that. And that's going to be the last thing to come back because those are all in intimate settings, relatively intimate, unless you're Elton John and you play Dodger Stadium. They're intimate settings, and people are afraid to go until there's a vaccine. And even after there's a vaccine, there will be a shakeout period before you can get those things back on their feet. So I'm very lucky because I can keep writing and have a revenue stream.
I could definitely agree with that. I a couple interviews ago, I interviewed a not local to me, but like a local underground alternative rock band called Lilac, and they had mentioned something that probably plays in just like you were saying, as far as like unless you're like Elton John, besides the fact that like these bands can't have the crowds that they want, the crowds, if the bands are performing live, the crowds aren't really getting 100% of the band either, with things like Lilac told me they tried to do a couple shows where everybody's pretty much in a plexiglass box and you can't really move around and do things as far as performance wise, which they felt wasn't really fair to the fans that came out to see him.
I was offered, there was a cabaret series in New York that was a fundraiser actually. And they wanted me to come in and do my act, which is like, it's like stand up. I call it sit down because I tell stories about my life in show business, and then do some political stuff up front. But they sent me the schemata, and it was I'd be standing behind a plexiglass booth, like the man in the glass booth, spitting onto the windshield,
right?
And they would all be like in compartments. And I thought, well, no one's going to be comfortable with this because you come in feeling like you're taking your SATs.
Right.
You're at a desk and there's plastic, and so I wasn't going to fly to New York also, so I declined, and it didn't work out. They did one of them with somebody, and it was just like too much work. And of course, because the crowd has to be socially distanced and small, in order to make any money, you have to charge them a fucking fortune.
Right.
So they were paying a lot of money to be very uncomfortable. It's not the key. Even if you're Hamilton, you're not going to get away with that. Hamilton may be the only thing that does get away with that. They do pay a lot of money, and they're not terribly comfortable, but they're not sitting in a plexiglass box with a mask and perhaps a shield.
That is true. I prefer the shield over the mask, really, because at least then I can still kind of breathe.
Yeah. But I don't think the shield doesn't do it. I mean, it's the shield and the mask. The shield is like for incoming, I think. I don't know.
Nah.
I've read 7 different theories on all this stuff, but
it's easy enough to just stay at home.
Yeah.
But with this information superhighway and everything else, couldn't you do something similar to what you were supposed to do in New York via, like right now, like Zoom,
virtual? Oh, there's tons of virtual stuff. I think people are well sick of it at this point.
True.
There are virtual concerts every night, and basically at the beginning it was all people sitting like you and I singing into a computer.
Mhm.
And that wears thin after not a very long time. And so then they've gotten more ambitious. I mean, Bet just did one for Hocus Pocus Halloween as a fundraiser, that where they actually shot a lot of stuff. They used a lot of green screen, but they shot live people standing up in front of green screens and things like that. And they went outdoors and shot stuff. And of course, they had all the onset protocols that everybody has now in order to film anything. But you know, still, you were sitting at home watching it at best on your big screen if you were hooked into your big screen.
Final question I got to ask, since we're on the topic of entertainment dealing with the coronavirus. When this pandemic finally goes the way of the dodo, when it's finally over, do you
Yeah.
think the world, especially the world of entertainment, is going to have the ability to return back to some semblance of normal, or is there going to be a, for lack of a better term here, new normal that will be part of the entertainment cycle? As the best way I can describe it as an example is like a lot of people are streaming movies as opposed to going to movie theaters right now.
Yeah.
Do you think we'll return to movie theaters? Do you think we'll return to?
Well, I think several things. First is the vaccine, and then if people feel better about going out generally, they will stick a toe in the movie theaters. What the studios have done is to push all of their big attractions back into next year, and specifically like maybe spring at the earliest, but summer. And they, at the same time, Disney has pivoted to Disney Plus, and they're putting a lot of the other stuff on Disney Plus to keep the service going. But their big pictures, they've moved back. For example, I mean, Jungle Cruise with Rock the Dwayne and Emily Blunt, and based on a ride at Disneyland, which was supposed to be a big summer picture this year, will be a big summer picture next year. And all the studios have done that. They had the experiment with the Chris Nolan picture Tenet, which didn't do all that well, but it was a Chris Nolan picture, and it was weird and not exactly the kind of crowd pleaser that some of the others would be.
Right.
So I guess my point is, when they put something in the theaters that people really want to see, and people are comfortable enough going out because of the vaccine that they will go out, they will start going to the theaters. And bit by bit, it will come back. This is my hope. Otherwise, we will just, sit and everything will be virtual. But, I mean, the rituals of going out, the ritual of going to the theater and being in a theater where everything is on a human scale and you are being related to in the live moment, that can't be duplicated. And the ritual of going to the movies and being in a dark room with strangers and seeing huge images in front of you, that cannot be duplicated. And there's a social function, you're not going to get laid sitting on your couch, but you can take a date to see a rom-com or something, or 50 Shades of whatever, and everybody gets warmed up. And that's the ritual that people want to do. You want to be in a room full of people who are laughing at something funny. You want to be a room full of people who are having the shit scared out of them by the doll in the attic. I mean, those are societal rituals that I don't think are just going to go away. I think that they're going to want to come back. They're going to come crawling back like the characters in the movie. So that is my high-minded view of what will happen.
What's the first entertainment social gathering you're going to go to when this is all over? What's the one thing you're going to go to more than anything else?
The Oscars have been pushed back to April 25th, so we'll see what happens. I mean, they're planning it both ways depending on what happens. So it might be that, or I don't know. I have no particular interest in. I mean, I don't care about being someplace for Thanksgiving or being someplace for. I never cared about that. But that's just, I don't have family, and I have friends, and if they feel like putting it together, that's great. But other people tend to have to do family things.
Oh, I know. I
You
got to
know,
go to a Thanksgiving dinner this year. By hook or by crook, we're doing it. Okay.
You know, it's like the whole thing is summed up. Years ago, I was writing on a show, and we were trying to nail down the story for an episode, and it was just getting late. And finally, the head writer said, "Okay, let's finish." And we said, "But we haven't done it." He said, "I can't help it. I have to go home to my fucking loved ones."
Well, that is awesome. Bruce, this has been
I wish it was my lot. It is now.
this has been an absolute honor and privilege.
Thank you. It was fun.
Guys, make sure you check in Bruce out tomorrow night on Colbert's special on Showtime, you said, correct? Showtime.
All
and
right.
do we know what time that's airing?
You know, I don't know. I would think it would probably start when the poll, like 8 o'clock Eastern, when the polls close.
All right.
But it's not hard to, just just dial it up and see.
I mean, see, we don't have TV guys anymore. We can't just look it up.
I know it's true, but on your TV, sometimes it will say that. Or
True.
Go to Showtime. Go to Showtime's website. And it's all there.
Absolutely. And of course, guys, if you enjoyed this episode in any capacity, hit that thumbs up button, like, share, comment, subscribe. Check out all the other great podcasts around the Miss Entertainment. If you prefer them in audio only format, just check them out on anchor.fm, Apple, iTunes, Spotify, Pandora, iHeartRadio, or wherever quality podcasts can be heard. And of course, guys, I want to thank our sponsor, the Nurses Guild. If you have a loved one who is in need of at-home nursing care, please give the Nurses Guild a call. The information is in the description down below. Their website, phone numbers you can reach them at. Great healthcare service, affordable prices, and helps out the veterans especially. Guys, check out the Nurses Guild. Again, Bruce, it's been an absolute honor and pleasure.
Thank you.
We
Bye.
definitely got to have you back on, maybe after the Colbert Report.
I'm available.
There you go. And we will catch you on the next Breaking the Fourth Wall. Have a good night.
Thank you.